Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to our daily drop update for Big Brother Canada 11. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and I'm here today on my own to update you on the latest from the Big Brother Canada 11 house. We are in a post-sock world, and we have a new HOH, a new target, and this time I actually have some actual information for you. So strap in, and you'll get to find out who the HOH is. Uh, because the HOH is anonymous, but we finally did find out who it actually is and who their target is. So I won't delay you any further. We opened up the latest drop with a conversation between Santina and Jonathan, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm I'm a little bit proud, of myself because it was one of my prime theories. Santina is the HOH, and she told Jonathan that she's the HOH. That is why Jonathan has been going to Hope and saying, "Hey, don't worry, it's not me, but I know who has it." And so Santina is our anonymous HOH, and her whole thing about like, "Oh, I don't even know what numbers are. I don't even what did I write? 105. Well, it makes no sense to me." Was all fake. So she's talking to Santina, or sorry, she's talking to Jonathan about who to target. And they're talking about somebody being a threat. Jonathan says the only thing that could screw up this plan is if Dan wins the veto. Then you could just put Ty up on the block. And she says, well, if I put Ty up and he's sitting next to any girl, it's clear he's the one that's going to go. Now, this was unfortunately a conversation that, as per usual, we cut into like the middle of it. So we're lacking a lot of context. And in addition to that, to make things worse, Santina's mic was really like not properly calibrated here. And so it was difficult to hear everything that she was saying. But it definitely sounded like she was saying something along the lines of, again, Dan, Ty, being potential targets, being potential people on the block. She says, Ty told me that if he touches the block, he's just going to walk out of the house. This is the thing that's been going around on Twitter all day. This guy is going to quit the game if he even smells the block. So she's worried because she doesn't want to risk Dan not going home because she wants Dan to be the one that leaves. So it seems like what she is inferring is that the initial plan may be something along the lines of Dan and a quote unquote girl on the block as initial nominees. If Dan wins the veto, Ty potentially goes up as the replacement target. If Dan doesn't win the veto, they send Dan out over whichever quote unquote girl goes up on the block. I don't know exactly what girl would go up on the block, but I think we could probably assume it would be Shania if Dan is the one that's going to go up. It would likely be Dan and Shania on the block. And then again, Ty as a potential replacement. Now, it's like Santina didn't exactly say that she would definitely put Ty up as the replacement. That was more seemingly of Jonathan's kind of suggestion. It's possible that Santina is trying to very much avoid touching Ty this week. But that seems to potentially be the play here, whether it's because she doesn't want Ty to quit the game or because she's just trying to protect Ty in the game, is not entirely clear. But roughly, this is the only conversation we really get about Santina's potential nominations. And it's, again, hard to hear and missing a lot of important details. But my best guess at this point would be Dan and Shania on the block. And then Ty as a potential replacement for Dan. If Shania came off the block, perhaps like a Renee or Claudia as a replacement pawn, I would assume. But again, hard to say. And then what they didn't discuss, and this was a little confusing to me, is what happens if Ty plays and wins the veto, uses it on Dan. I assume at that point, the target is going to be one of these women, with potentially Renee or Claudia going up on the block. But again, hard to say at this point because we're getting very little information from the situation. So that seems to be the plan. It doesn't seem like Ty will go up initially. And I also doubt that he will actually quit the game if he goes up on the block. But it is what it is. Jonathan says to Santina, if you went with this Hope situation and figured something out with him, he'd be loyal 110%. He'll evict himself before he betrays. So this gives us another potential avenue here, which is that she may be considering nominating Hope, or at least that seemed to be one of the potential implications of that statement, that maybe she's thinking about throwing Hope on the block as a pawn because he is just a perpetual pawn and he could help prevent Dan from winning the veto. He may also just be referring to working with Hope, the idea of working with Hope. But either way, Jonathan is trying to connect Hope and Santina here. And it would not completely surprise me if Hope ended up being a nominee for Santina, because again, he's offered himself up as a pawn so many times, and that's just kind of how he's playing the game. So he says, either way, this is perfect. And hey, you can trust me. I'm with you. This is what we're doing. So that seems to be the plan for now. Santina does talk to Hope a little bit. She says Dan has been acting weird. She doesn't know if he just doesn't like her or what it is, but Dan has been acting weird. Again, Dan is now her target, so it's not surprising that she's feeling this way. Hope, again, is going to talk a little bit weird here. He says, when Rob went up, we all should have come together and talked instead of running around separately. Now all the big players are going after each other, and the floaters are going to cruise to the final five. You got this sense from him yesterday as well when he was talking to Jonathan about, hey, could we just go to Ty and say, let's set aside our differences and take out some of these girls? This is Hope again, kind of like loosely referencing the idea, the dissatisfaction of the current state of the game for Hope. He does not like that all of the big players keep targeting each other and going after each other and going and leaving the house. And he keeps loosely mentioning these things to potential allies, to now Jonathan and now Santina, that like, hey, we shouldn't target big targets. We should be targeting these floaters. So that seems to be where Hope's mind is at, but he's surrounded by people who don't really want to hear it. Jonathan doesn't care. He wants to go after Ty and Dan. Santina at this time, I don't think really cares. She really wants to go after Dan. So just something to keep track of that's worth sort of, keeping in mind is that like, I think if all that stuff hadn't gone down with the letter and everything, I think Hope would be working with Ty again still. But there's a rift there now, and he's too close to Jonathan, and Jonathan is currently like a buffer preventing that from happening. So again, just worth pointing out. Claudia is going to talk with Ty. The cast in general is going to spend a lot of the time in this drop outside, or not outside, but in the warehouse that is supposed to resemble a backyard. They're like in lockdown. And so these conversations are happening in front of everyone. Claudia and Ty on the couch with everybody outside are cuddling and like speaking to each other. And at one point, like Daniel is literally sitting on the other side of the couch because it's like double backed. So this, couches on both sides of their back to back. And he's literally like sitting there leaning over almost as they're talking like mad game. And I'm just like, how are people not hearing this? It's totally possible that they are. But Claudia and Ty talk. She says, me, you, Dan, and Shania need to talk. She says, I know Shania is not going to go for it, though. Ty says, well, I talked to Renee, and I told her I think Jonathan is the HOH. Renee told me she would rather keep me over Dan in a situation where Jonathan nominates me and Dan. Now, we know this is true. We know that Renee has been pitching for Dan to go before Ty. So she apparently has straight up told Ty this information. Hey, if you end up on the block, I'm with you over Dan. I will take Dan out first. And he says, this is literally the exact scenario we told you guys was coming if you didn't keep Zach. You should have kept Zach. And if Dan leaves, I'll be the sole guy holding it down in physical comps. And what then? So he asks Claudia what would happen, what would she do if Renee went on the block next to him? And she says, oh, that would be really hard. And she goes on to say, well, Renee may eventually turn on me because of how close she is, how close I am with Shania. Renee is kind of the third wheel between in our group. It's her and Shania. And we knew this from the diary rooms, but I wasn't sure if this had changed because of the Dan situation. Claudia is saying this outright to Ty, whether it's a lie or whether it's true, remains to be seen. But it does, again, back up what she said in the diary room now about a week and a half ago. Claudia says that she's tighter with Shania. Renee is kind of the third wheel, and that Renee may know that, may see that, and because of that, eventually turn on her, whereas she feels Ty wouldn't turn on her. So that's kind of her answer of who she would choose between Ty and Renee. Now, obviously, she's going to say this to Ty. There might be some truth sprinkled in, but the overall answer is a lie. It might be completely true, or it might be entirely a lie at this point. We can't know for sure, but my guess is that it's a little truth sprinkled in, but that she would ultimately choose the women over Ty. So he's like, oh, I'm glad you see that. I'm glad you see that. She says, I really want Hope and Santina gone. Her two biggest targets are Hope and Santina. Ty says, I'm cool with that. Obviously, I want Hope gone, and I don't really have anything against Santina, but after what happened last week, I'm not going to stop you from taking a shot at Santina. Be my guest. So kind of an informative conversation there about where Claudia may stand, or at least how she's representing herself to Ty, and kind of where Ty is currently standing, which is not too much of a surprise. Dan and Shania are going to talk for a little bit. A lot of like, I wouldn't say flirting, but like getting to know each other with the awareness that there's like a little bit of a crush that is being entertained. That makes sense? Like that kind of vibe. There's a little tiny bit of game. Dan basically says, I talked to Jonathan and didn't get a great vibe from him. I feel like I could be in danger from Jonathan being HOH. And she says, I just hope we don't both go up on the block. I just realized that could be a possibility. And I think it might be a decent possibility at this point. Kuzi is going to talk to Jonathan in the pantry. And something that we learned from this conversation and a couple of future ones is that Kuzi and Anika are absolutely convinced that Dan Zabo, is the anonymous HOH. They are sure of it. Kuzi says to Jonathan quickly, it's absolutely Dan S. It's absolutely him. And Jonathan's like, I don't think so. I don't think it's him. And Kuzi says, no. Listen to me. The girls think it's you, but it's absolutely Dan. Him and Ty, they were in the pool area and they were there for a long time. And I'm telling you, it's going to be me. I think it's going to be me and Hope going up on the block. And I think you are the replacement nominee, Jonathan. They get interrupted. And Kuzi ends up talking to Hope next. And she says, Hope, it's absolutely Dan. Dan is the HOH. I'm telling you. And Hope is like, are you sure? And she says, yes, it's absolutely him. And I think you and me are going to go up on the block. And I think Jonathan is going to be the replacement. And Hope says, well, listen, no matter what happens, I will make sure you don't go home. You have my word on that. I've already betrayed one person. I'm not going to do any more betrayals here. My life in this game is yours. And she's like, I appreciate that. So then again, they get interrupted and then everything reshuffles and Jonathan's back. And Jonathan tells Kuzi, listen, I know you think it's Dan. I really don't think it's Dan. I really think that the person who is the HOH has the same mindset as us and that you are not the target. She's like, really? Yeah. I'm saying that, like, people in this game, they trust me with things. They come and they tell me things. Just trust me. I think the HOH is on our side. Couldn't be more blatant. So I assume at this point, Kuzi likely realizes that Jonathan is either the HOH, or if she has any sort of the same deductive reasoning that I had yesterday, she may also come to the conclusion that Santina might be the HOH. So Kuzi now has this information. We don't really see Kuzi again on the drop, so I don't know what she does with it. But Anika has not been given this information, so Anika at this point still very much thinks it's Dan. So in the meantime, Shania is going to have a conversation with Ty. Shania says Anika really doesn't think it's Jonathan. And he says, oh, it's Jonathan. You can tell by the way he's acting. Ty expresses frustration about the HOH competition. He says, I wanted to actually compete. And it was this dumb gambling thing. Like, what is that? It's so disappointing. Do you know what show you're on? Both agree it's not Dan. Dan is not the HOH because he would have told at least one of them. Between the two of them, he would have told one of them, and he hasn't, so it can't be him. Claudia is going to talk to Renee, and Renee tells Claudia, again, basically, that it's a brief conversation. We need to wait and see where shots are being taken this week. And it's kind of a whispery conversation. But the gist of it is she's saying whichever side gets taken a shot at, whichever side gets weakened, we should move in the direction of that side to bolster them, to keep the sides even as much as possible so that they will keep taking shots at each other. Again, just good, solid, strategic maneuvering from Renee in terms of trying to make sure they're making the most of their situation. She's even going to talk to Shania a little bit later about like how they kind of found themselves in this position. They didn't actively seek it out, but now that they're here, they should try to make the most of it. Renee is continually the one pressing this to both Shania and Claudia, who don't seem as interested in using this position. They both seem a little more interested in siding with Ty and Dan, but Renee really wants to ride this middle for as long as they can. And it seems like things might play out in the way that she wants, where if Dan is the target, then she wants them to then go and use Ty a little more. So it may work out the way Renee wants. Whether that's a good thing for her game or not, yet to be determined. They both agree again, Claudia and Renee, that their ultimate end game is to get to the final four with Daniel. They want to get to the end with Daniel. Claudia, Renee, Shania, and Daniel, final four. That's their plan. So Ty and Anika are going to talk. She asks if their trust is still fine. And he says, I told this to Kuzi as well, but I think the move that was made is fine. It was a good move. I can respect a good move from Kuzi. The only thing that bothered me was that whole letter situation. She says, okay, that's fine. Let's not play games this week, Ty. I know the HOH isn't Jonathan. I know it's Dan S. He sucks at acting. It's very obviously him. And Ty says, no, it's not Dan. I'm telling you, Jonathan sucks at acting. He's the worst actor in this house. It's him. She says, no, it's not him. I'm telling you. I would know if it was Jonathan, and it's not him. And Ty says, well, I'm telling you, it's not Dan. I would know if it was Dan. I swear on my mother, and that means a lot to me. It is not Dan. I know it is Jonathan. This is Ty and Anika. Anika says, well, I'm telling you, I know it's not Jonathan. He told me it wasn't him, and he would not lie to me. And Ty says, well, why are you so sure he wouldn't lie to you, Anika? She's like, because he's not a liar. Whoops. Slipped a little bit too much information there, I think. They keep going back and forth on this. That they're both wrong. Final conversation of the day was this Renee and Shania conversation I was referencing before. Again, Renee just pitching that same move to the weaker side argument to Shania, and Shania says, well, we can just tell the men, Shania says, I can tell that the men want to continue what they pitched to us last week, so that's good for us. So that's what we got from the drop. Headlines here. Santina is the HOH. She plans to nominate Dan and probably Shania, possibly some other options. Ty is maybe a backup target, but Dan is her actual target. She would love to take Dan out of the house. We still don't really know exactly what is going on with Kuzi, Anika, and Daniel, where their heads are at, where they're looking to maneuver. They seem to be loosely working with Jonathan, but that's not super clear at this time. The women are a little bit divided. Claudia and Shania seem to want to go in the direction of Dan and Ty. Renee kind of wants to ride the middle some and would love for Dan to leave so that they have a little more freedom to move. Now, that might not be the best play for Renee, depending on what Renee is actually doing. Like, is Renee still talking with Kuzi and Anika? Does she still have those connections? Because if she doesn't, then she's just weakening a side that is allowing for, the Kuzis and Anikas to get in with the Jonathans and the Hopes and even the Santinas. I don't know why I've pluralized everybody at this point, but it's certainly could leave her vulnerable if she's not careful, right? This playing of the middle is important. So making sure that you're actually still maintaining those connections is just as important. So we don't, she could be talking to Kuzi for all we know. We just aren't, we don't see a lot. So we'll see. We'll see where all of this goes, but it's definitely a weird situation right now. For Santina, targeting Dan, I think, is mostly fine. I mean, Dan and Ty aren't really doing anything for her. The weird thing is that the anonymous nature of this HOH almost makes things a little worse for Santina, at least right now. Ultimately, she'd want to get credit for this move from the players like Kuzi and Anika, who may then bring her in to some degree, because as of right now, she basically has nobody other than Jonathan and maybe Hope. And all sides are kind of looking at her as an easy target. Obviously, Kuzi used her as a pawn. I don't know if she's been working on that relationship. I don't know what the relationship is with Santina and the women, but it certainly does not seem to be good, considering that Claudia is looking at Santina as one of her primary targets. So how can Santina get out of that situation? It could be by siding with, firmly taking a stand with Jonathan, Hope, Kuzi, Anika, and them. Or it could be to just try and actually just take out one of those women, like Claudia or Shania or Renee, as a way to take out one of those people coming after her, while leaving in the men to target the rest of the other side, like Kuzi and Jonathan and Hope, while she gets to have her own kind of middle. Could be an option for her, but not one that she seems to be looking at this time. So a lot of different things in motion, and of course, a lot of things that we do not know. And it is likely that we will not find anything else out until Monday, where we will see what the nominations ultimately were, because they did happen yesterday, just after the drop content. And then what happens with the veto, which should be being played today, and who wins it and all of that. So hopefully we have more information for you on Monday. But for now, that is what I have for you. We will also have we'll have a stock watch on Monday, where we will do our best to rate these players as much as we can. And then we'll just keep it moving. Tuesday, find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taran Armstrong, watching the episode live with all of you. After the episode, here to recap everything that goes down. I just recorded a Survivor stock watch with Amon, which was very fun. And make sure you check out the Taylor podcast I did talking about the live feeds. And I also filled Rob in on the whole sock situation as well. So if you want to get the rundown on that, you can check out the podcast I did with Rob yesterday as well. So tune in for all of it. Thanks for joining, and I will see all of you next time.